So we are going live now.
Hi, good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the session on cyber risk. With more and more reliance on data, what we have seen that a lot of companies are getting affected by the new cyber attack. And recently, there has been many high profile cyber attacks on many corporates, and that has resulted into a lot of loss in terms of both revenue as well as stoppage of business as well as customers. In the recent survey, it has been seen that cyber for the last 7 years has been the top risk faced by major corporates. Data is the new oil, as we have seen, and it flows across the system. And anything to do on data or the IT system results into this. If you say the top risk for cyber, they have been compared to risk like terrorism, to natural calamities. So you can actually see how great a threat cyber attack has become of late. To discuss this in more detail, and often a lot of cyber incidents have resulted into litigations and lawsuits. We have got two very eminent speakers. So let me introduce Mr. Supratim Chakraborty from Khaitan and Company. Uh, Supratim comes with a very strong background on the cyber law, and it is an expert on that. And he'll take you through the intricacies of the legal aspect of the cyber risk. I've also got Manoj Kumar, who heads the cyber practice at Global Insurance. Manoj has, been practicing cyber risk from both as an underwriter and as well now as a broker, and he has been advising very large corporates to how do you design a cyber risk program, and because buying a cyber risk insurance is not like buying a car insurance; it has to be customized. So without coming in between the experts, I would like to introduce Supratim to go first on the topic. Obviously, you're welcome to put your questions on the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. Over to you, Supratim.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I hope I'm audible. The time allotted to me is about, I think, 15 minutes. Uh, uh, Believe me, the subject that we are going to cover is quite vast, and therefore this time may not be sufficient. If I'm overshooting, I request the organizers to please cut me short. Happy to I'll conclude there. If I can have my presentation on the screen, happy to begin. As the presentation is coming up on the screen, let me share this very interesting anecdote. So we were very closely a part of the upcoming new law on the Personal Data Protection Bill. Okay, and Justice Sri Krishna, you would be aware, is the chairman of that particular committee which drafted the bill. And many people asked him this question: that why are you not putting insurance or cyber insurance as a mandatory element into the bill? He had a good laugh in one of the sessions that we were together. And he said that, if you make it mandatory by law, people would, in all probability, run after the cheapest that is available in the market. My intent is not that. My intent is that people should go on their own volition and pick up the right product that is there in the market. So, that's from the horse's mouth. So you can imagine the importance of it and why it is not inscribed as a mandatory element. And still it is being told by Justice Sri Krishna himself that you can always look at the best product that is suitable for you. So I think that fortifies what Saurabh was trying to allude to. With this, I'll get started. I'll cover a very important element of cyber, which is data privacy and protection. Next slide, please. Um, why do we need to talk about this? There are several reasons. I have enumerated few of them here. Economic importance of data protection, global data flows, several guidelines and circulars. Global laws are developing. Every jurisdiction is coming up with a new law, and you have to be compliant with all of them if you are a global player. So the task on compliance side has increased quite a bit, and demonstrating compliance is also becoming very critical in tandem. So it is not important that you do things. You have to also document and keep it documented well, so that in a bad day you are able to demonstrate to the regulator or regulators maybe across jurisdictions if you're operating across jurisdictions to show that you have been working on it, you have been actually compliant. Sophisticated cyber attacks, again, as Saurabh was mentioning, work from home, I think, has opened up new vulnerabilities, okay, which were not there before. We had to face a plethora of attacks, strict fines and penalties, which has been globally imposed now. We are, of course, looking forward to the upcoming bill, personal data protection bill, the one that I was talking about. And to give some data sets here, India is second most affected country by ransomware attacks in Q3 of 2020, and in the top five phishing hosting countries in Q2 of 2020. Next slide, please. So, when we were working on laws, on foreign laws, such as the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, we saw many large organizations were sitting on the fence. They thought when such laws will come into place, and there is actually a penalty slab, will look into it, and then you see the numbers in front of you. It's quite alarming across the globe. Next slide, please. So, to make it worse, I think we were thinking that we are quite safe. Some of the organizations thought that, we need not worry because India does not have a law akin to European law. Our upcoming personal data protection bill is emulating the European General Data Protection Regulation, and the penalty buckets are like this. It is 15 crore or 4% of total worldwide turnover is one bucket. Second bucket is 5 crore or 2% of total worldwide turnover. There are imprisonment provisions and there is compensation provisions. You can imagine how rigorous the law would become. It will be akin to your competition law fines, which is quite steep. Next slide, please. Coming to the subject itself, data privacy and protection. Whichever organization you are in, whether it is a big, mid-size, or a small organization, these are three kinds of data you will always come across and you have to protect. The first one is confidential data, which is on the right-hand side, large blob that you see. You will protect these through contractual measures, maybe some tech measures, etc. And on the left-hand side, you'll see the large blob is personal data, which is to be protected. In relation to personal data, as far as India is concerned, you should remember that consent is king. So if you are handling any kind of personal data, ensure that you have taken proper consent from the data subjects or the people whose data it pertains to. In the center is sensitive personal data or information. Here, it is not only consent, but you would also have to go a step ahead and have other security measures which are set out in the law, which you have to take care of. So this is largely the construct. It is followed domestically and largely in international laws also. So a basic understanding of what is data set as far as data sets as far as the organization is concerned. Next slide, please. So what do we have as a law on data privacy and protection in India? We do not have any exclusive legislation. Right to privacy, of course, has become a fundamental right. On a sector neutral basis, it is the Information Technology Act. And this long name that you see, in short, we'll call it the privacy rules or sensitive personal data rules. That protects your sensitive data and personal data. And sectoral regulations are, of course, there. Like Reserve Bank of India giving its dicta to banks and NBFCs, IRDI giving its dicta to insurance players, so on and so forth. There are other legislations also, our old archaic legislations also come handy. The Indian Penal Code, Consumer Protection Act, Contract Act, all of these play a patchwork role. Next slide, please. This is a quick snapshot of some of the cybercrime related sections and how it has an interplay. There's an interplay between the IT Act and IPC and the kind of penalties that one can face if these cyber crimes are concerned. Next one. Next slide, please. Now we'll talk about two sections a little in detail because these are very critical as far as data is concerned. Section 43A of Information Technology Act. This talks about sensitive personal data. If you are handling any kind of sensitive personal data, then you need to have reasonable security practices and procedures. And if you are not having that, and if there is a wrongful loss or wrongful gain caused, then damages are payable by way of compensation. It is an uncapped bucket. So when GDPR came into effect, interestingly, many organizations sat up and said, oh my God, 20 million euro or 4% of annual global turnover, it's huge. I had a good laugh because we always had Section 43A sitting, which is an uncapped bucket. Perhaps not many are aware of this provision. That if it is an uncapped bucket of compensation which can be meted out by the adjudicating authority. Next slide, please. So what is sensitive data? Very interesting. Okay, this is a thumb. It's a very important slide. You must take a look very carefully. What I have done is on the left hand side, as per the present day rules, IT Act rules, these are sensitive personal data. So any password of an individual, financial information, physical, physiological, mental health conditions, sexual orientation, medical records and history and biometric information. If you are handling these, be additionally careful about how you are protecting them. There are specific requirements under the law. Interestingly, when we go for mergers and acquisitions and there is a target which we are looking into, and we ask them that, are you handling any sensitive data? Very often we are told, no, no, we are a very simple company. We don't handle any sensitive data. Rest assured about that. And then we start looking into their system and we observe there is biometric attendance at the gate. The HR would be sitting on tons of medical data because there is medical insurance being provided. Things like those, just simple examples, but it shows that how we are unaware that there is sensitive data seated. To make it worse, India does not have a culture of privacy, So you have to kind of educate and re-educate people that there are certain very critical sets of data which we have to protect. Otherwise, there could be a exposure to the company. In the center is draft the personal data protection bill. You see the list of sensitive data will become longer. So your responsibility or liability will also become longer, and you have to protect all of these in a more stringent manner. On the extreme right hand side is GDPR, the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation. They also have a set of special categories of data akin to our sensitive personal data. This is just a snapshot for your quick understanding. Next slide, please. So what do you do today if you are handling sensitive data on a sector neutral basis? The sensitive personal data rules under the Information Technology Act says that you should be protecting it in a particular manner. You should have reasonable security practices and procedures. There are norms in relation to disclosure, consent, collection, privacy policy, transfer, grievance officer has to be appointed, so on and so forth. So most of these, trust me, are not very expensive. It's all about having the right knowledge and how do you deploy it within your organization. Maybe in a more broader session where we will have more time, we can go through each of these elements. Next slide, please. The other important section of IT Act, Information Technology Act, is Section 72A. Very, very important because this is not dealing with sensitive personal data. This is any personal data. Okay, so anything that can be related to a natural person. So if you have procured personal information whilst providing services under a lawful contract, and there is disclosure of such personal information without the consent of that person or in breach of a contract that you have with the person, there could be punishment, which could be imprisonment up to 3 years or fine up to 5 lakh rupees or both. So quite rigorous and quite widely worded. Next slide, please. Now let's talk a little bit about the upcoming personal data protection bill. Like I told you, it is akin to the European law, very rigorous, and we have to do a lot of things to be compliant with it. It has got extraterritorial jurisdiction. There are key definitions which have been introduced. Data localization, cross-border transfer related elements have been brought in. There are new compliances which you have to follow. There are new data subject rights. Now, what is data subject rights? Just to give a very crude understanding, most of the laws across the globe on data privacy and protection have been brought into effect to empower the individuals about their data. So they can ask you that what is the data that you have about me? I want to rectify the data, change the data, edit, erase the data, and you have to really help them in those individuals in complying with these requirements. Heavy penalties and compensation, like we already mentioned, pretty steep, and there will be a designated data protection authority. Next slide, please. Like I was mentioning, there will be data principal rights. So there is right of confirmation and access, which is self-explanatory. They can say, please tell me, any customer or even your employees and consultants, they can ask you that an organization, what is the data that you have about me? I want to confirm it, access it. I want to exercise my right to be forgotten, or right of erasure. I want to get my data deleted. Right of data portability. So portability is basically, suppose you go to bank A, open a bank account, and the bank will ask you, please give me your Aadhaar PAN card. Again, you go to bank B, they will ask for your Aadhaar PAN card. So there is a system which is being thought about where from bank A to bank B, the movement of data can be seamless. And the last point is, like I was mentioning, right to correction and erasure. Erasure was not there in the previous version of the bill. It has been put in the new version. Next slide, please. Apart from this, there are other compliances also which have to be taken care of, such as privacy by design. Very simply put, let's take a simple example to understand privacy by design. When you go to a restaurant, you have had your food, you ask for the check, and they will get you, if you're paying by card, they'll get you a point of sale machine. Some of them come with a cover, some of them come without a cover. So the one which comes with a cover is the simplest example of privacy by design. Whoever thought of developing the product kept privacy in the center of things. So whatever you are doing in your organization, whether you are developing a product, a service, taking a management decision, if you are keeping privacy in the center of things, that should be very good. That is good enough for a basic understanding of privacy by design, I would say. Transparency requirements, security safeguards, breach notification, very important. You should have a protocol in place. Grievance redressal has to be in a appropriate manner. Data protection officer needs to be kept. And these are the ones with asterisks are for significant data fiduciaries or significant data processors, people who are processing a large amount of data. The definition is yet to be crystallized, but that is largely the meaning. Record keeping and data audits have to be done in a proper manner, and impact assessment. Next slide, please. So this is my concluding slide. I hope I've stuck to my time. The key takeaways for this session, I would say, is be compliant with the present day laws. Unfortunately, not many in India are aware that there are indeed present day laws on data privacy protection, cyber laws, which you need to be compliant with, because the penalties there could be quite steep. There is more sensitization right now that we are observing. Therefore, earlier penalties, etc., which were remote, are becoming reality. Prepare for the upcoming law, as the gold principles will not change. So many people are waiting. Oh, the parliament is yet to debate, and we have a lot of time. Trust me, when the European law came into effect, they gave 2 years, and the European companies were not able to cope up in 2 years' time. Okay, they already had a law. It was one step up for them. For us, it's a quantum leap, so you have to prepare beforehand. Um, Evolving cyber attacks call for advanced cyber security measures. There's no two way about that. A tone of the top is very critical. So, in any organization, the top bosses have to decide this firmly. Also, you need to have dedicated teams who would run the show for you. And last but not the least, cyber insurance acts as a critical line of defense. Always remember that. And over to my other fellow speakers now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Supratim. That is very useful. And yeah, it's a very dynamic environment, which is ever changing, and it'll be interesting to see how fast and what new things and what new surprises it brings to the legal as well as the insurance fraternity. So Manoj, your thoughts on how can you protect? Because that's I think everybody would be wanting to know. How do I protect my cash? How do I protect my business? What are the products and everything around the cyber risk insurance? Over to you, Manoj.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Supratim, making my life easier, starting with the cyber insurance and ending with the cyber insurance. Please move on to the next slide. So I'll be optimally using next 10 minutes to explain the trend, majorly the exposure, what we are seeing current, and what would be the exposure going forward, and a couple of live cases, what we have seen in the cyberspace, and about the product, cyber insurance, and the selection of a right partner. Please move on to the next slide. So the exposure, what we are seeing, the technology is rapidly changing. The speed and scope is beyond imagination. The attacks are becoming very sophisticated and targeted. The frauds and fakings are on the rise. And the good thing is the awareness about the risk and the regulation is stepping up. So 70% of the workforce is remotely connected at this point of time, and we expect 50% of the workforce will be remotely connected forever. And IT Ministry tells the Parliament there are 7 lakh reported cyber attacks in India till September 2020. The IBM has conducted a India-centric cyber breach studies, and they have come out with a certain startling numbers. The average cost of a breach in India, which costs about 14 crore, average cost per record which is lost or stolen, which is close to around 5,500 rupees. So if you can multiply, if it is 1,000, millions or lakhs. And what are the causes of the cyber breaches in India? 53% is coming from malicious attacks. System glitches contributes 26% and human errors 21%. Please move on to the next slide. A couple of case studies. The first case study is the outsourced vendor's network was breached by the hacker. They passed through the insured's VPN using the credential of the outsourced vendor, and they found a resting place in a dormant server in the insured's network. Sitting there, learned all the IT administrative rights, created legitimate scanning and extracting tools in the network. They started taking out the confidential information. Through external notification, this company came to know about a suspected breach. They reported this claim under the policy. Policy successfully responded to the instance. The total spend was close to around $400,000, and it was majorly spent on forensic review at various ends. They had conducted from various jurisdictions of the client's operations as well as at the vendor's premises, and a huge disk forensic review was also carried out. Next slide, please. This is a recent example where the customer understood the vulnerability at the e-payment process of the client's end, and he changed the payment parameters, manipulated in such a way per transaction subscription amount was reduced, and carried out multiple transactions. The auditors found there is a huge revenue leakage in the reconciliation process, and this claim was reported under the policy. The policy responded to the forensic, containment, as well as the recovery of the data. And the spend was close to around $250,000. Please move on to next slide. What is cyber insurance? A product overview. The cyber insurance policy provides you 2 major coverages. One is the third-party liability, and the second one is the first-party expenses. What is third-party liability? Data liability. Supratim has already explained to you the data with the consent which is coming in, and there are lots of obligations on the enterprises. So if there is a loss of personal information or corporate information, there can be liability which would be coming from individuals or body corporates on the entity from whose care, custody, control it is compromised. If any body corporate which is passing on any kind of IPR, including patents and trade secrets, to the companies for any business purpose, when it is getting compromised, there can be a huge legal liability on the entity. Second one is a media liability. When your content, which is defaming anybody at large, or specifically any of your customers, peers, anybody is defamed, it can bring in a huge amount of a defamation legal suit, as well as any kind of a violations with respect to copyrights or IPR, which can bring in any kind of a large legal suit, and the policy will be responding under the multimedia liability. Conduit liability. When your network is used as a vector to carry any malicious codes and it is introduced into any other target's network, which brings in any kind of a liability on you, which is a conduit liability. So all these 3 are the third-party liability sections under the cyber liability policy. The most important part is the first-party expense. Whenever there is a cyber event, you have to respond to the situation. You start with the detection, that is the forensic and the investigation activities, which we have seen in the last two claims that look almost all the spend, which was in the detection and escalation activities. Then there is a notification. The data subjects are to be informed, notified mandatorily when there is a privacy law in various jurisdictions. What we are also expecting the similar kind of provisions under the personal data protection law in India. Then post the data breach, which you have to set up a credit monitoring system, and you will be having lots of regulatory interventions where you have to respond to the investigations of the sectoral or general regulatory bodies. And if you are found short of compliance, then look, there can be a regulatory fine. The policy will respond to that also. Now, if there is a DDoS attack and if your network is interrupted, it can cause a huge amount of business loss. That is, a net profit is lost, and the policy will indemnify the loss of net profit. And ransom demands are on the rise, ransom attacks are on the rise, and the policy will respond to that situation to engage with the parties, and as well as if there is any ransom amount which is to be paid, the policy will pay that part also. Please move on to the next slide. Consider that, look, you would require some kind of a product. Product is the key, but a selection of the right partner is the most important thing. Why? Because identifying the exposure and making a cyber profile of yours and matching it with the insurance contract, that is the most important thing. And estimating the probable exposure and converting it into insurance limits, that is a key, the professional service which you would require only an expert can provide. And structuring the right kind of insurance contract. The proof of the insurance contract lies when it is triggered in a real life claim situation. So the fate of the claim is almost sealed at the time of structuring an insurance contract. And then making aware of all the stakeholders about the trigger points and the conditions, do's and don'ts of the contract. And last but not least, when there is a claim, you require an expert to make sure you get the claim at the right time in the right amount. So all these would require an active dialogue engagement with the internal stakeholders. It starts with the CISOs and the IT team and the senior management. Obviously, cyber is a business risk, which is everybody is taking in very seriously. Then human resource team, because too much of awareness among the employees is required, because 21% cost is the employees' negligence. Then the finance and the legal team about the compliance, as well as the what should be the cost, what should be the kind of the limit depending upon the exposure, quantification of the exposure, and what should be the cost and optimal structuring of the insurance. So that's it from me. Thank you. So we will look into the questions.
Thanks, Manoj. Very, very useful session, and obviously, it's a very so Manoj, just to break the ice, and obviously, it's simple to buy the cyber risk insurance. Insurance company and buying a cyber insurance. Can you explain?
Yeah. Cyber insurance policy, the most important point is understanding the cyber profile of an entity. Even the industry wise, when you look into the companies, the profile changes from within the industry also. So the most important part is first you have to list down the profile of the company. What are the exposures? You need to work with the CISOs, IT team and the legal team, explaining to them these are the exposures, what are the mitigation measures which are there. And the second one is about the quantification. Supratim was talking about the contractual requirements. Sometimes under the contract, you must have already agreed with the customer for a certain limit. That becomes a mandatory limit for you. So you can't fall short of any of that, stipulated limits. Otherwise, you need to carry out the quantification exercise and make sure you make a policy in a customized manner. A tailor-made policy is required to respond well to any kind of a situation. So that is where the complexity, and it is not a matured market or it is not a matured product, it is evolving. As the exposure evolves, you would see lots of, because insurance risk, reacts to the technological advance for various kinds of claims. That's where it is a collaborative exercise with the insured, and insured would require a right expert to advise them to structure their right product.
Thanks, Manoj. Supratim, this obviously is a very dynamic, as you mentioned in your presentation, a very dynamic world when it comes to cyber, because every day probably and every incident would create create challenge or a new kind of a lawsuit. So how does one keep track of this, and how does one protect purely from a legal side of this, and what kind of challenges do you think uh, you you face and or you can help?
Right. I know, Saurabh, a very, very pertinent point because globally, what we observe is, I also mentioned during my presentation, there are several laws which are getting developed, amended, reworked across the globe. Many of the players in the market are operating across jurisdictions, okay, and they have to be compliant with everything. Um, Therefore, what we have observed works well is to have a standard set of gold standards or gold benchmark where if you follow those, you are largely there. Okay. Of course, you have to do a bit of fine tuning. For example, let me put up this amazing example. There's a bank which said that, oh, we have got some foreign collaborators and they made us GDPR compliant. So we need not worry about Indian law, for, present day, future law. It's really not required. But nonetheless, if you guys can do a bit of dipstick analysis, that would be good. And we observed fundamental errors, okay? And I'm just putting forth a couple of them so for easy understanding of everyone. The age of consent in GDPR is 16 years. It can go below up to 13 years basis the member states tweaks. However, it is 18 years in India, okay? Um, Financial information is sensitive personal data even today under the Information Technology Act and also in the upcoming Personal Data Protection Bill. But the GDPR does not consider this to be a special category of data or basically a sensitive personal data equivalent. So you can see that, of course, there is a little bit of delta which is there, and you have to follow the stricter of the lot. But nonetheless, if you are following the gold standards, you are 85 to 90% there. So I think what is happening, and this is a good thing, is that the world is somewhere moving in the same direction, and the gold standard is getting set.
So, Supratim, when you refer to gold standards, can you what is the reference point, and can you just elaborate on that?
Right. So, like I was telling, let's take this example of the data privacy and protection. Okay. So, personal data protection is emulating the GDPR model. Now, the general data protection gives some of the basic tenets which are accepted in a way globally. They're considered to be very good. And if they are adopted, you would know that you would be protecting an individual's personal, sensitive personal data. Okay. Of course, there will be a top up of local requirements, perhaps, or any sectoral requirement. But if you have largely followed those, then you should consider that as far as demonstrating compliance is concerned, you would be able to show to the regulator to a large extent that you have been really following the law in essence or in principle.
Manoj, we have one question from the participants. How do you see the industry evolving next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, cyber insurance is one of the fastest moving products in the insurance, general insurance table at this point of time, and it is clocked a premium of close to around the $4 billion, which is expected to grow to 7 to 8 billion by 2025. In India, also in the liability sector, when you look into it, cyber has done extremely well, which is currently it is a close to around $50 million premium is there in the Indian market, and which is growing at around the 20-25%. And if you look into the cyber security in the capital market, some of the shrewd investors are looking for cyber security firms to invest, because in the next 20-25 years, where you would be seeing the multi-baggers. Multi-baggers would be coming from the cybersecurity space. It tells the story that look, this is going to expand because as the technology expands, it comes with a lots of perils. And obviously, cyber criminals are very sophisticated. They are using the artificial intelligence to carry out a stealth attack. So that look, you would require very sophisticated cyber security as well as cyber mitigation. So cyber insurance as well as cyber security will be growing at around 20 percentage CAGR for next 10 to 15 years. That's my take.
Thanks. This is a question I'd probably pose to both Supratim and to Manoj. With respect to, so, and this has been asked by one of the participants, Rakesh. So, what is the criticality of cyber risk or cyber attack with respect to the health industry, especially with respect to hospitals? And do you think it also flows into and is equally serious or critical for organizations like NBFCs and all? So, probably go over the thing first and then come back to Manoj.
Right. Thank you very much. I think, again, very pertinent and very question. You would have observed in the recent past that the health sector has been, including hospitals, have been in the center of attacks, and it's quite vulnerable, I would say. Considering this whole entire pandemic situation, things, the focus has, of course, moved towards attacks on health and healthcare sector, which has to be protected much more than ever before. What we observe is historically these sectors have not, especially the health sector, I would say, have had any strong in some of Deco banks and VFCs on the health, we saw nothing much has happened. There was one law draft legislation which was called DISA, which is on digital health data, which had come out some time back. But that did not see the light of the day, unfortunately. And therefore, it's very clear that there is a lacune or there is a lack of sector specific legislation there. Therefore, two things have happened. One is cyber attacks and cyber issues have not been addressed to a large extent the way it should have been. The kind of penalties that should have been meted out, unfortunately, have not happened to my mind. The other important aspect is mergers and acquisitions. Okay, when we see that acquisitions happening in the healthcare and hospital sector, we see large data sets of patients are moving hands from participant A to participant B. But you would understand that the core data that is getting moved is that of the patient, and probably adequate consents have never been obtained from these people when this such a movement has taken place. So I think now that the upcoming law is there in pipeline, we are hopeful that all these would be addressed because some of these elements are very clearly set out there. There is still nothing in pipeline which is very, I would say, near term as far as health data is concerned. But which is applicable to all players, both government and public, private, I would say. And I really hope that something comes up very soon on this.
Manoj, what's your take on?
Yeah, sir, it's a very relevant question because some of the Indian outsourcing companies, which they have been penalized under the HIPAA legislation in the US for a couple of breaches. So HIPAA is related to a healthcare, privacy matter. So what I just want to tell you is that look, if you are exposed to the US market and if you are compromised with respect to any of the health records, there can be huge liability as well as fines and penalties on the enterprise. Even in India, because the health records are being targeted, so the companies which would be very seriously looking into the mitigation. At this point of time in India, most of the companies which are buying in the IT space because of the contractual requirement, then the financial institutions, because they know that lots of fraudulent transactions are happening. Now, healthcare companies are also seriously looking into it. And all the sectors, even the manufacturing enterprises, are seriously looking into a risk management way of buying a cyber insurance policy. But healthcare, obviously, they are on top of the chart and which they are being targeted and which they have to seriously take a mitigation and they're easily demonstrating the mitigation strategy through an insurance program. So that's my thing.
So Manoj, extend the same discussion. So NBFC microfinance companies. So there are there are participants who are interested in knowing what kind of claims can come for a microfinance company when it comes to cyber attacks and all the things. Can you elaborate on that? And if a claim comes, what is your role and what's the role of a say Manoj in that?
Yeah, whenever there is a fraudulent claim, there are a couple of programs which act in concert. One is the traditional crime insurance as well as the cyber liability. So why I'm talking about this is because why people are targeting financial institutions, because money is there, because they are storing the money and people want to easily take out that money from that system. So obviously when somebody takes fraudulently some money from account to an unintended account, both the policies will come into play. That's why I told you the crime policy will act in concert with the cyber insurance program. Here, you would require the help of an expert to make sure that look, both the policies are triggered independently, and we have handled such a claim where there was a cyber breach which led to a fraudulent transaction to the tune of close to around $100,000, as well as the breach which led to the trigger of the cyber liability policy in a financial institution. Both the policies responded. The crime policy responded to the fraudulent loss which happened because there was a fraudulent transaction. The cyber liability policy responded to the forensic investigation and the other mitigations associated with the breach. So that's the way which you have to do. So multiple programs have to be structured, especially when a financial institution, looking for any kind of a cyber mitigation or a crime mitigation.
Supratim, question to you. Can the board of the company be held liable for not having a very strict cyber policy within the company?
Yes, of course. I think the news is tightening, I would say. Earlier, it was not as pronounced as it is becoming right now, and it will become even more amplified as we go ahead. So there is a definite onus on the board and the entire management to have proper, cyber etiquettes, cyber policy, and also, like I was mentioning, demonstrating compliance. In the cyber world, you would see that even after you have done everything, there is a possibility that something can go wrong. And therefore, what becomes very critical is what have you done to plug those, starting from, the attendance sheet of the compliance training program to training people how to really work on a breach reporting form. All of these come very handy. So you have to now have a very strictly chartered out program in your organization, and no knee-jerk reaction can really work as things are becoming quite strict and streamlined.
Thanks, Supratim. A question to Manoj. Manoj, I'll give you a situation, and I just want to get an answer on that. If we have it's a media company and it's keeping TV shows or films, and some hacker hacks into the system, and will the media company be liable, and will the insurance policy pay?
Sir, I have not got your question correctly. So could you please repeat?
Okay, I basically am trying to address the case what happened to Sony, where a hacker got into the system and got the film released much before it could be released online on Netflix and all. So in a situation like that, can this even be insured?
Yeah, so obviously, when there is a breach, the cyber policy will respond to the situation because you need to carry out the response activities like forensic and all. The loss of business, as I was explaining to you, the cyber profile which is to be established, and you need to structure a contract according to the profile. So if it is going to bring in any kind of this kind of an interruption, which is going to bring in any kind of a loss of business to them, obviously they would be getting the protection under the policy. So we need to customize a product for them to trigger in that kind of a situation and respond to those kinds of losses.
Supratim, what has been some of the, so obviously without naming anybody, is any interesting case you'd like to share? Where you or you've been or you heard about it purely from a legal point of view. But yeah, obviously you can keep your confidentiality. We don't know names and all. Are they on cyber attack in India in particular?
Yes, I think there are several, of course, because of confidentiality. I cannot really name, but this one on a no names basis, I must share. There is this manufacturing company, and again, just like your hospitals and healthcare, the manufacturing sector is often a very, I would say, a soft target because perhaps the IT systems are not given due attention, because of which there are attacks which go unnoticed. So what happened in this case is for several months, there had been a man in the middle attack, and they did not know that they had been interacting with the cyber criminals whilst exchanging invoices, etc. And it so happened that they were also sharing draft versions of the invoices which had got the bank account details, etc. And finally, a payment was also made to a bank account which was not really sent by the original counterparty. The counterparty never received the amount and finally initiated an action in a foreign jurisdiction. At that time, they realized that what could have gone wrong, and there was a huge hue and cry in the system. And at that juncture, they started realizing that a large part of the system was infected. Of course, we took a very, I would say, staggered approach, and we told them what is exactly has to be done from a legal perspective, from a tech perspective, from insurance perspective, all of these. So it was I would say, very good interplay of several teams in unison, which finally salvaged the situation. And I would say just one thing here, that when initially the first set of emails came from the counterparty, somewhere they accused India and Indians to be like this, and that we kind of finally quashed to say it was not us. It was some foreign jurisdiction issue, which we finally managed. We've managed to curb and make good. The entire issue was resolved, I would say, amicably. So I think it was one of the good landmark cases.
That's a very interesting point, Supratim. So if something happens in, say, happens out any affected is in India. So which law applies, kind of thing? How do you, are there regulations around that, and how does it tell? I mean, how does
Right. Sorry, Manoj, sorry, I don't know whether you heard Saurabh, but what I could hear, I'll just try and attend to that question. So, it's an issue, okay? Multi-jurisdictional issues are very complex and very difficult to handle. There are treaties, but sometimes these treaties take so much time that, it becomes fruitless to really chase a cyber, crime in foreign jurisdictions. However, having said that, as far as the letter of the law is concerned, of course, many of them, almost all of them, have extraterritorial jurisdiction. For example, even if an Indian entity is having, say, presence across the globe, and there is a strict law which is there in foreign jurisdiction, which they have to follow. Sometimes they believe that, maybe perhaps Indian law would not apply just because it's a foreign data set or foreign individual's data set. The requirement under IT Act, Information Technology Act, is if there is a computer or computer resource in any way involved in India, then information technology gets triggered. So just an example how it is worded, so that people understand that it is not about the nationality of the person which is involved. It is sometimes the jurisdiction or the computer resource location which could also be relevant. Example, but yes, that is how you have to study various laws in order to understand how to really assess a case. Okay, let me also give a very short example to wrap this up properly. Um, Indian regulator asked for some information from a US based intermediary, and they say that you should give this information because you have an India entity. The intermediary say that though we have an Indian entity outside in outside jurisdiction. Whilst we are happy to cooperate with you, but there are certain protocols and processes to be followed. We were assisting the foreign intermediary. However, we were also mindful that we would be fully, be cooperative with the Indian regulator. What we did in that case is explained to the Indian regulator the exact nuance of how do you get that data. Like, for example, there is something called a content data and there is something called a non-content data. So if you are having a mailbox, there could be something like a basic information about your name, your email ID, etc. And there could be information relating to what you are discussing within your mailbox or mail exchanges. So that has got a much higher threshold of procurement from a foreign jurisdiction as compared to non-content data. So we actually educated the Indian regulator and we were always cooperative, and I think it was a win-win situation, honestly.
So posing the same question to Manoj. Manoj, do you think the jurisdiction, every insurance company has jurisdiction?
So when we structure the insurance contract, the jurisdiction is worldwide. So I don't see that, look, even though there would be a jurisdictional issue to settle the litigation, but as far as the policy is concerned, because it responds to the worldwide, anywhere the claim is filed. And the territory is also worldwide. So there is a economic nexus. We don't get into the economic nexus to establish the territory or jurisdiction because the contract is structured on a worldwide basis. So the wrongful act can happen anywhere. The claim can be filed anywhere. The policy will respond to the situation.
So Manoj, I'm sure other people on the audience would be interested in knowing what kind of things get covered under the insurance policy. What is insurance market offering? What is it?
So the cyber insurance policy is responding to the third-party legal liabilities. That is a data liability. So anybody who brings a claim against the insured entity alleging that, look, there is a compromise of privacy from your care, custody, control, or the confidential data is compromised, or the intellectual property right which is given to them which is compromised. So that is a large third-party liability. And the second part is that, look, when the regulator brings in any kind of an investigation, you have not complied with the regulations, whether the sectoral regulator or the general regulator, and to respond to the investigation. And if you're found guilty of or if you're found short of non-compliance, then there can be fines or penalties. Civil fines and penalties are also covered under the policy. Then the first party expenditure. So whenever you want to respond to a situation, you would require lots of assistance in the form of, say, forensic notification, credit monitoring, mitigation, containment, recovery. All those, you would require lots of experts to carry out these activities. The fee of these experts will be covered. If there is a ransom attack, the ransomware, which is introduced in your system, which brings in a huge, ransom demand, which is to be paid. The policy pays that ransom demand. And if you have to engage with those guys, the hackers, and you can hire a consultant to engage, that fee also will be paid. Last but not the least, because the business interruption, if there is a DDoS attack, your network is down, you are not able to carry out the business for, say, 2 days, over and above certain time threshold, the loss of net profit, which is also being paid under this program. Currently, we are handling a claim which is a business interruption in the financial institution space. The business was down for almost, they were not able to book some of their the programs for almost a week time. So there is a loss of net profit, which is the policy the underwriter is looking into, the quantification of the amount and all.
Manoj, often people say that cyber claim, if it happens, it becomes a very, very complex claim. And I know for sure you're probably one of the people who've handled a cyber claim in the Indian market. What's your view? How a cyber claim gets handled, and how easy or how difficult that, and why somebody needs an expert like you to handle that?
The difficult part is in structuring a right insurance contract. Once you have done that, the claim becomes easier. So we have handled the first cyber claim in the Indian market. That is also a large attack on the financial institution. So we have seen that, look, we were able to settle the claim in less than 6 months' time because the contract was wide enough to respond to the situation. So many a times what happens is, because you need to look into it, you have to use a certain imagination what is happening across the globe. You might have to expand some of the coverages. Like, look, some coverages might not be explicitly addressing the exposure which is prevalent. So you need to expand those definitions and see that, look, how broad you can make it. So once you're able to put together that kind of a contract, I don't think that, look, claim is a bigger issue.
So Supratim, how I mean, you did mention something on how this market is going to evolve. So your last, I mean, on this session, where are the critical, which are the critical areas you think more regulations have to come in as far as cyber is concerned? They just last two and
See, sort of the way I look at it is any of these new age developments, technological developments that are taking place, we should have umbrella legislations. Okay, you cannot have granular detailing about technological aspects in legislations. For example, if you had a law for pagers today, it would be in dustbin, right? So therefore, you need Indian Penal Code, which has survived the test of time. The way it is worded is broad brush, it's umbrella, and the situations can still fit into all of these. So that's how I think each of these subjects should be addressed. In near time, I think what is going to happen is there are two, three things which are getting debated right now in the policy circuit. One is unbundling of the Information Technology Act. The Information Technology Act was never supposed to be a bouquet of things the way it is. Okay, it's today attending to data privacy, cyber security, digital signature, electronic contracting, all of these. Right? It was not meant for such an activity. So therefore, there's a discussion where they're thinking that should we unbundle it, okay, and have separate specific laws. Of course, to my mind, all of these laws should still be broad brushed and umbrella. That should be a good approach. But you will perhaps soon see this unfolding in a big manner, apart from, of course, laws around, say, blockchain, AI, and a much more comprehensive and robust cybersecurity law.
thank you, Pradeep. Manoj, last one yet. From a tax certainty point of view, any comment on cyber risk?
Sorry, sir, I didn't get your question.
Your last view from a contract certainty, what is your view? The current insurance wording and how does it going forward? Do you think there is a things still to be done to give more clarity to the customers? Just
With respect to the property damage?
yeah, cyber.
Yeah, so the debate is going on. So say that, look, whether the cyber policy will respond to the property damage arising out of a cyber attack. See, it's very clear. Most of the underwriters are not providing the coverage. There are multiple issues. One is that, look, a cyber market, when you are looking into take the case of an oil major, they've got to say 1 lakh crore property to be insured. The cyber liability market today, which can't put more than $200 million capacity for that kind of a risk. So obviously the traditional cyber underwriters, which they are very clear that, look, they are not providing the coverage. But there are certain underwriters which they are very explicitly providing the coverage for the property damage and the resulting business interruption. So it is very important that, look, you need to, we need to structure a very.
Running short of time, I'd like to thank both Supratim and Manoj for giving a lot of inputs. Thanks to all the participants who made it. So we will be running few more series on this on the insurance part. Thanks everybody for participating. Sorry, Manoj, I cut it.
Thank you.
Reply. If there are questions, by
Thanks a lot. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Supratim.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Manoj. Thank you, Saurabh. Bye.